Welcome back to a brand new edition of Ariel the Bad Guy right here on all the platforms. I'm Ariel, and that's the bad guy, Chael P. Sonnen. And Chael, I don't know if you know this, but tonight, UFC 262. And I don't know if you know this, but tonight is the UFC's 7th trip to H-Town, Clutch City, Houston, Texas. I don't know if you know this, but there's a vacant title fight at the top of the bill between two of the hottest fighters in the sport, Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. So just wanted to let you know.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
We got a lot to talk about on this pre-show here, Chael. We're counting down the minutes to UFC 262 going down this evening on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Of course, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, top of the bill, vacant lightweight title fight, Tony Ferguson, El Kukui against Beneil Dariush. Chael, there's no one on this card that's more than a minus 160 favorite. As far as the betting lines are concerned, it's the closest 5-fight main card since 2017, May of 2017, UFC 211. It's a lot of numbers. I had to get it right. 10 ranked fighters on the main card. That means it's a close card. That means the matchmakers did their job. Let's start with the main event. Let's start with Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. There's two great storylines here, Chael, right? There's Charles, 28th UFC fight, 11 years in the UFC, or there's Chandler, second UFC fight, getting a title shot. Which one do you like? Which one do you want to start with? I'll give you the honor.
I would like to start with Charles. And, you know, when you talk about how close the lines are, put me in that category of undecided era. I know who my picks are, but I'm not bullish on any of them.
Okay, there you go. So let's start with Charles. What a story. 11 years, most subs, tied for most finishes in UFC history. Are you surprised by this? Did he always have this in him, or is he surprising you with what he's done as of late? Because he's turned into one of the best lightweights on the planet.
The surprises for me in hindsight, now that I see, right, like a fine wine, his career's gotten better and better. The last performance he had was clearly his best performance, and at the right time. First time in the real spotlight in there with Tony Ferg. But I think I'm more surprised at some of the losses that he has. I don't know that those guys could beat him again. I would be a little bit surprised if those guys could even compete with him. I think there was an ironing out process. I think there was a piece of Charles Oliveira's career that we saw right in front of our eyes where he didn't believe in himself. And that's a very real thing. Even the greatest of all time, St. Pierre, the first time he was in there with Matt Hughes, didn't know that he belonged. Got stopped in the first round, said, give me a redo. And of course, it was a very dominant performance. I only share the George story with you to remind you it is a very real thing. When we see a guy fight 28 times and we see him grow up right in front of our eyes, we see the bad and the good.
Losses to the likes of Jim Miller and Frankie Edgar and Cub Swanson, Ricardo Lamas, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis. Some of these are, legends, but I agree with you. I don't know if they run it back now, certainly not now for a lot of these names, if those guys can even hold a candle to him. And so how does this happen, Chael? How does someone fight in a promotion for 11 years and have this up and down career and miss weight and all this stuff? And how does he figure it out after all these fights? I mean, this doesn't happen in sports, right? You're not like, I don't want to call him a journeyman, but like a mid-tier NBA player or mid-tier NFL player, and then all of a sudden become an MVP. How does this happen in fighting?
Well, I'll tell you this. When you have a good day, you get up, you put your boots on, you go outside. When you have a bad day, you get up, you put your boots on, and you go outside, right? They're very much the same. And it's only when you come home that you can look back and reflect. And I share that with you because he really did grow and mature in front of our eyes. Look, this is a kid. I'm getting to know Charles very personally just in the last couple of weeks. I'm friends with one of his lifelong friends, a guy named Gabriel Checo. But Checo's been filling me in on the human being. The fact that Charles is still in Brazil, he's still in a favela. He's the one that provides the food and the toys for the entire community. He has very different goals, and Checo assures me that he will never leave. He will never leave this area, and he will never quit taking care of this town. Now, I think that does speak very highly to who he is as a person, but also show you some of his insecurities. Some of the things where he probably wasn't the most confident guy. All of a sudden, he's on TV, and the whole world's watching him. All of a sudden, his face is on posters. All of a sudden, Dana White's putting him on marquees. And now, in this case, a title fight on pay-per-view on ESPN. My goodness. Sure, he was a little bit apprehensive. That only makes sense. But, Ariel, I submit for you. That's in the past. I submit for you. Charles Oliveira 2.0 now does know how good he is. Now does know that he belongs. And that's a very different animal.
I would argue maybe it's 3.0. When he moved to 145, could have been 2.0. But this version, regardless of what number, the best. I love that Chael's bringing us some backstory here, getting us emotionally invested in Du Bronx. This is great journalism on your part, Chael.
And Ariel, I don't know what happened, but I just lost you, buddy. Oh, there you are.
I'm back.
I got you.
I'm back. These are the, you want to know what really happened? Should I break the fourth wall?
Yes.
Someone was driving outside my house and the Bluetooth connected to the car. So you were talking maybe to my wife for a couple of seconds there.
I felt as though I heard like a garbage truck. I was going to say that to you. I go, hey, Ariel, somehow I feel like I'm outside your house. That's funny, man. Technology, right? We love it, but it gets us sometimes.
I mean, we're just a small operation here. We're just trying to get by. You know how it is.
Have you ever seen A Clockwork Orange?
The movie? Yes, of course.
Yes. Well, it's happening to us a little bit. Technology just burned ESPN. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah. So like I was saying, thank you for giving us the backstory.
That's a very intelligent comment I just made to you. For anybody that's a literature nut, that is a very intelligent comparison I just made to A Clockwork Orange.
No wonder it just went over my head. I'm not a very smart guy. Chael, back to Charles Oliveira. You know, you just got us emotionally invested in his journey a little bit. What a story. But what about that fight against Tony Ferguson back in December? I agree. Probably the most impressive. You know, you can make a case for the Kevin Lee fight as well. That was pretty darn impressive. But with the stakes and the spotlight as big as it was back in December, it was impressive. What did he do so well against Tony Ferguson based on your recollection of that fight?
I appreciate that you just said I helped to get you emotionally invested because, Ariel, that's how I felt. When I was confronted with this brand new information from his lifelong friend of Gabriel Checo of where he lives and how he takes care of that town, of why he does it, because I got to know that. As a fan, Ariel, I have to know, and even as an analyst, I got to know why we're here. What are we doing? If it's a cash grab, now I know your motivation. And that's a good, strong motivation, but it's not going to be as hungry as the guy that's got an intrinsic value. I think when you look at Charles Oliveira, okay, the big surprise in that Tony Ferguson fight was twofold. First off, not only was he able to weaponize pace and match that of Tony Ferguson's, in many ways, he had a higher output than Tony Ferguson. There's nobody that we could ever say that statement about until Charles came along. And secondly, Ariel, it was those takedowns. My goodness. He threatened Tony at the press conference. I'm going to take you down. I'm going to give you a jiu-jitsu lesson. I remember when he said it was in one ear and out the next. I thought, oh, no, you're not. You are not taking Tony Ferg down. And if you do, it's not going to be at will for 15 minutes. Excuse me, it was. There was 7 takedowns. They all went to Charles Oliveira. And that was a huge surprise. The way he cut off the ring, the way he came in, got to that double A perfect position, lifted him off the ground, let gravity do the rest. But it is relevant because that's also where Michael Chandler, in many people's minds, mine included, has the upper hand. But we could be wrong.
Right. Okay. I was just about to ask you that. So considering Chandler's skill set, considering his wrestling foundation, are you expecting a dramatically different fighter, Charles Oliveira, this Saturday, tonight?
I will tell you that Oliveira tonight has got to take charge. I can say that until I'm blue in the face, but there's only a couple men that have ever gotten over on Michael Chandler, and they all have one thing in common, which is they controlled the dance. Chandler's very strong. He's very compact, but he's also very quick. Most guys that are muscle sharks like he is, they're not as fast. He got the best of both worlds in the DNA pile, okay? He's got the strength, but he's got the speed as well. And I bring that to you because taking charge is a tough thing to do. You either got to get your hands on him or you got to start with a jab. You got to hurt him right away. You got to crack him in the nose. You got to crack him in the eye. You got to do something to slow him down. I've only seen it by a very few men. Patricio Pitbull comes to mind. It's a hard thing to do, but it's still the necessary thing if you're going to beat Chandler.
All right. So what do you expect from Chandler? This is a guy, you know, you have a wrestler take down a jiu-jitsu guy. You don't want the jiu-jitsu guy on his back, right? You don't want that to happen. How does he approach this fight?
I will assure you this, he's going to be consistent. Michael Chandler, in no way or fashion over the last 3 months, has sat down with any one of his trainers or strategists, studied his new opponent in Charles Oliveira, and is going to change the game plan of Michael Chandler. Chandler is going to come at you. He's going to hit you. He's going to keep you guessing. He's going to push the pace. He's going to get on top. He's going to grind. He's going to get up when the bell goes off, and he's going to come out and do it again up to 5 times if that's what's necessary. And I bring that to you because I saw Dan Hooker. And I think Dan Hooker, I picked Dan Hooker to beat Michael Chandler. I'm not sure if they fought again, I wouldn't pick Hooker again, but I also wasn't armed with the information that Hooker was going to change his entire style. He comes out moving left. He comes out moving right. Lateral motion is a good thing if you're a fighter that fights laterally. Dan Hooker doesn't. Something he saw about Chandler led him to believe he needed to acquiesce to his own skills and come in with a new strategy. Ariel, that's wrong. You dance with the one that brought you, and I promise you Chandler will.
Taking a step back, looking at Chandler's career, you know, you've been in attendance, I do believe, for a lot of his Bellator fights, your work over there. Were you there, by the way, when he was knocked out by Patricio Pitbull in May of 2019?
Yes, and I was stunned.
Okay, okay, again, like this is not a guy who, you know, became the fighter that he is today overnight, but it looked like maybe that was like the ceiling, right? Like, who would have thought even a year ago, Chael, in May of 2021, we're talking about Charles Oliveira against Michael Chandler for the vacant UFC lightweight title. How did he get here?
Sure. Well, he stayed consistent. He kept coming back. He never hung his head. He never went into the depressions. He always looked forward. Look, the world's a big place. You get stuck in the cracks, Ariel. It's one of those things. You're the guy that's 35 years old wearing your Letterman's jacket and talking about your life fell apart because you dropped the ball in the winning game in high school. That's a real thing. Maybe I exaggerated a little bit, but Chandler never did that. And I got to credit it. Yes, I am a wrestler, but I got to credit that to wrestling. In wrestling, Ariel, you don't have any time to be down. It's tournament format. You get beaten, upset, you're up again in the consolations in 40 minutes. I only bring it to you because it's a different mindset. Not everybody has it, and not everybody can copy it. Chandler's not going to get down in the dumps. He's going to learn, and he's going to move on. We saw him do it with Will Brooks. We saw him do it with Eddie Alvarez. And don't tell me how the results of those matches went. I'm telling you, as a guy that was willing to try, was willing to learn from his previous mistakes, close the gap, and proceed on his journey.
Have you noticed this about Michael Chandler? When he got to the UFC, it felt like the fans sort of felt like he was entitled. Oh, you don't deserve this
Sure.
stand. As I just knocked my water down, you don't deserve this standby position in the title fight in October. Oh, even Tony Ferguson with the great line on Thursday night, Dana White privilege and all this stuff.
Brilliant.
But it does seem like he has been able to win the fans back. It feels like now I look at the comments when you do a Michael Chandler interview and everybody's like, I didn't really like this guy. He seemed like a teacher's pet, goody teachers, but I really like him now. He's a walking, motivational quote. I really want to see him win. I want to get behind this guy. Have you noticed that as well? Pretty amazing.
Listen, Ariel, one piece of this story that got left out when we're having our little pick on Michael Chandler session is that Michael Chandler was been offered 4 things in his short little career in the UFC. He said yes to all 4. There's no other 55-pounder. You and I both share the frustration with the current 70-pounder squatting on their spot, I believe is a term that you taught me. Chandler says yes, and then yes again, and yes again, and yes again. And sure, opportunities come that way, but why wouldn't they? If you need an answer and you know the guy that's going to give you the one you want, that's the guy that you called, and that's exactly what happened here. I got no problem with it. I think it's fair play.
Yeah, and he's done a great job of winning people back. I mean, I really thought, gosh, this is the kind of guy that fans aren't going to get behind, but now all of a sudden, they are behind him. Yes.
May I share something with you? And this
Please.
shines my own wheels just a little bit, but it's relevant that I pat myself on the back to tell you this story. But I called Chandler's last fight in Bellator. He was fighting Benson Henderson. Prior to the fight, now make sure you understand, prior to the fight means Chandler is in the back. He can't hear anything. He's getting his hands wrapped. He's getting warmed up. But I'm doing a broadcast, and I said, if you're going to beat Michael Chandler, you got to take it to him. You cannot let him lead. You've got to use your speed to do it, and you got to be the first one to do it. Because if Chandler gets out front in a race, he is never going to give that first starting position back. Okay, fine. Fight ends. 3 days later, Chandler's returned home, pulls up the DVR, and rewatches what I had to say about him. He sends me a text message, and he says, Chael, I heard what you said, and I heard the advice that you had for Benson Henderson. You're very good at your job, and that's all he said. But what I'm bringing to you is, I am right when I tell you this, but Chandler also knows that I'm right. Chandler knows this is a game of who can take the lead and who can do it first. You go watch where Chandler's had success, and you watch the nights that he didn't. Largely, you can base it back to who touched who first, who scored first. It is so important for Charles Oliveira to know this about his opponent, to come out and take charge right away. First contact likely wins this match.
I mean, that's why you are the gold standard. Insight like that. I mean, you're telling us about Charles Oliveira's favela life. You're talking to us about random text messages from the great Michael Chandler. By the way, I totally believe that story. That is something that Michael Chandler would do. That is great stuff and great insight into the fight. All right, we'll get your pick on the fight. And by the way, worth noting, I gave you some crap last time. You went, correct me if I'm wrong, you went undefeated, right? 5-0,
5-0, baby.
And you know what's so funny? They kick you while you're down, but did they give you your flowers when you went 5-0? No credit.
Exactly right. And Aaron, not only did I go 5, they talking about the Chael curse, right? Not only was I 5-0, I called 2 of them. I called knockout by Usman. I called ground victory by the Bullet. That surprised a lot of people, but I had it right.
Yeah, and I didn't see a lot of people giving you credit, so I feel like that's
even
unfair.
A broken clock is right twice a day, partner.
Well, we'll see if today will be the twice, but that'll be later in the program. For now, let's talk about the co-main event. And, there are some fighters in this sport, Chael, that we love to analyze their demeanor leading up to fights, what they're saying, what they're doing. Tony Ferguson is at the very top of that list, right? Like, I feel like it's a complete, breakdown of what he's saying and what he's doing in the press conference and all that to kind of try and get a feel for what kind of a fighter is going to show up on Saturday. What are you seeing out of Tony these days leading up to this fight? 2-fight losing streak, must-win situation. What do you feel when you see him?
Okay, history is not going to repeat itself. Now, let me start at the very beginning of this timeline, because if you are a top guy and you ever lose your spot, you're never getting it back. It just doesn't work that way. If you're a top guy who went all the way to the championship and you changed camps and trainers and cornermen, that is the beginning of the end. It's one of those things that you're lying to yourself and you're telling yourself and you're grasping the hope, and history says you're all done. And in this sport, you never wake up done with it, Ariel. You wake up one day and you find out it's done with you. Excuse me. I don't see it with Tony Ferguson. I got one specific reason. It's 2 words. It's Freddie and it's Roach. Let me tell you this. You want a different result, you got to be willing to do something different. And Tony has done just that. Now, the other fighters that have come along, as I talk about, history says, didn't have access to the great Freddie Roach. This is very different in physicality speaking, okay? Because mental, Tony isn't slipping at all. Physically speaking, he's getting hit. He's getting hit a lot, and he's getting hit early. He's trading. I want to tell you why he's doing that. Muay Thai, kickboxing, not a lot of head movement. Reason being, you got to have your feet planted so you can land those kicks. Tony came out understanding I'm probably going to get punched, but he was really counting on some of those leg kicks. He used them. It changed the fight with Cowboy Cerrone. It changed the fight with Anthony Pettis, just by example. Now, Freddie Roach is going to have none of that. He's going to have Tony right back, blocking, using his hands. That's where the hands open up. That's where the takedowns start to come in. And maybe he's got to leave the kicks in the back a little bit. But I really do believe that Freddie's going to have fixed that. I hear great things about Tony's work ethic. I know, as he's my former teammate, that his mind is like a sponge. I know he's open to ideas. I'm banking on him. I'm counting on him. If any part of that analysis is wrong, there's going to be the 3rd straight loss for Tony Ferguson. But I think it's right. And I think you see old T-Ferg coming back.
Wow. Okay. So you said a lot there. And of course, you mentioned Freddie Roach. What a legend. Freddie has worked with a lot of MMA fighters. Rarely does he corner them. He will be in Tony's corner based on what we've been told this evening as he fights Beneil Dariush. So that's a big deal. But Chael, I want to love this story. I want to believe in this story. I like the idea that he's training with Freddie Roach. He's training at Wildcard. I like the idea that he's trying not to get hit, move his head, all this stuff. But Tony Ferguson is Tony Ferguson. When that door closes, will he really be a different fighter regardless of who's in his corner?
Let me tell you why I say yes, okay? And I do concede to you, nobody can be changed, particularly in 4 months, no matter how good their training is. But this is different, partner. Tony's not needing to be changed. He's needing a refresher course, and he's needing to go back. Tony Ferguson, you go watch Tony Ferguson on The Ultimate Fighter. He was a moving target. Tony Ferguson in the last number of years, and I think it's because he was gearing up for Khabib specifically. Khabib is not a big striker. Khabib is a big grappler, and some of those leg kicks would have been helpful. When the Khabib fight got canceled, Tony was still locked in the same strategy. So I bring it to you, and I submit for you that learning something new, no, not likely at 36 years old. Being reminded of something that you've already known and going back to it, yes, very realistic.
All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, again, historically, I actually don't like when MMA fighters go and focus too much on boxing, right? I mean, like, look what happened with Conor McGregor, for example, back in January. Sure. I actually think this is the one time when, the idea of going to focus on boxing will actually help Tony Ferguson, correct? I mean, he needs that type of structure. He needs that type of defense. He needs to move his head, all that stuff. I want to believe he will be a different fighter. I just don't know if once that door closes, or Chael, once a couple of punches land, I feel like you kind of resort back to what you know best. You become the crazy wild guy from the past. So we'll see how that plays out. But would it be fair to say, Chael, do or die for Tony Ferguson tonight? He has to win this. No, unfair. No. Really?
No, it's not do or die. Like, just to use a familiar name, but Cowboy Cerrone, of course, came up, and Dana said, one more. If it doesn't go well, we're all done. No, I don't think that Tony's in that spot right now. However, it will be the end of the dream of recapturing a championship. There will simply be no roadmap that leads Tony back to that kind of a fight. No, I think that Tony's still got a place. I think that he's going to be a main card fighter. I think he's smart enough to know that and go call somebody else out. And I think that we kind of wash our hands with it. But I will see what you see, and we will have to have a little bit more of a real conversation. As I'm telling you what I expect from Tony, and I very much do, I need to juxtapose that against his opponent because Benny is not to be played with. Benny is on quite a roll himself, and Benny might have a quiet mouth, but he's got a very open mind. He's also one of the few guys that can match Tony in pace. Tony has found a way to weaponize pace, but Benny can do that too. Benny can stay in there. I'm counting on a couple of things, okay? I'm counting on Tony having that head movement, having learned something and gone back to something he used to do with his time at the wild card under Freddie Roach, but I'm also counting on Beneil Dariush to be nervous. I'm counting on him to be starstruck. I'm counting on him walking into an arena that's absolutely sold out and hearing that noise for the first time and letting that get to him just a little bit. It's not just that Tony needs to fight well. He's also going to need Benny to underperform.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't strike me as the nervous type, but that's certainly something that could happen because this is by far the biggest fight of his career. This is the first time in almost 5 years, by the way, that Tony Ferguson is a betting underdog going into a fight. Of course, those fights against Khabib didn't come to fruition. That could have changed things. But that fight, by the way, 5 years ago was Rafael dos Anjos. He won that fight. But I think the odds makers got this right. Dariush is on some kind of roll as of late. His last 6 fights have been amazing. And when he came into the UFC, Chael, as you know, he was primarily known for his groundwork. I really feel, I mean, I'm impressed, I will say. And I think Rafael Cordeiro deserves a lot of credit here. This man has turned into a very dangerous striker. The overhands, the spinning back fist, all this stuff. I mean, he's got a full arsenal here. Do you agree that he has come a long way? I mean, like the results speak for themselves, but like this guy can hang with Tony. If Tony Ferguson is the reckless Ferguson of old, he could get caught. He could get knocked out by Beneil Dariush.
Tony Ferguson at his best is still going to have to burn some calories against Dariush. Yes, Dariush is something very special. Look, here's what's going on at 155 pounds, because this might sound like a surprise for some of our viewers, but 155, which in my opinion is the hardest division, it's very deep, but then it's got its stars, and they're not necessarily the same guys. The top 4 and 5 guys are very hard to get matches with. It's very hard to break into this division because you have the stars that want to get up in the loft and they want to pull the ladder up behind them. Tony Ferguson, for the second time, is dropping that ladder down so somebody else can get up. Dana White said that he recognizes it and he'll show the same respect to Tony with the victory. But yes, Dariush is a rough night out. Nobody wants to fight Benny. Benny's last fight, in fact, was a rematch, and nobody cared about the first match. He never would have done a sequel, except nobody would fight him. They had to find a warm body to go in there, but that's respect. Guys are seeing Dariush, Ariel, and they're saying, no, find me someone else. It's a very big surprise, and I respect it tremendously that Tony, one of those stars I referred to, said, come on, kid, somebody gave me a chance, and now I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, say what you will about Tony Ferguson. I mean, even Oliveira, no one wanted to fight him in December, and he said, I'll fight him. And on relatively short, it was like 3-4 weeks tops when he took that fight. Do you suspect that this fight is contested more on the feet or on the ground?
Okay, I think that that's a good question because of what we saw happen last time with Tony. We have simply never seen Tony out-grappled until, save one, Charles Oliveira. So Dariush is probably going to look at that. He's probably going to look at the fact, hey, I got some of the same skills that Oliveira did. Oliveira walked him down, quartered him, waited until his back was against the fence, came up with that double, and caught Tony off guard. Now, I don't think that Tony's going to be caught off guard for a second time. I think Tony learned something about Tony in that fight, which is, look, I got to be ready for everything. And we can talk about he's buckled down to the wild card gym. That's not the only place he's training. He's still under the watchful eye of Eddie Bravo, by example. And I know some wrestlers that have gone in, Division I guys, young guys, and they're getting takedowns with him. I believe that Tony's going to be ready for a little bit of everything.
All right. So that is a big fight in the lightweight division. And I think, by the way, like, I don't think there was anyone on the planet who a year ago, when they were in Jacksonville and we were thinking that we were going to get Khabib and Tony, finally didn't come to fruition, who would have predicted in a year later, May of 2021, that Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira would be fighting for the vacant lightweight title. Who would have predicted that? No one would have predicted that. I wouldn't be surprised, Chael. 8 months from now, Beneil Dariush is fighting for a lightweight title as well. I don't think a lot of people are saying it, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's that good. I think he is that well-rounded. I think he has looked that good as of late. And if you just kind of look at the landscape, I think he has a real chance. I don't know if he ultimately becomes a champion, but I think he has a real chance of being in that title picture. And I think this win puts him in that title picture.
Sure. I wouldn't disagree with that. I think those 55-pounders need to get a little bit busy. I'm kind of scratching my head asking where Justin Gaethje's at. And somewhere I heard that he might even be held out for a #1 contendership. I think that that's silly. I think that Dustin Poirier is likely the best fighter, but I'm not convinced that Oliveira can't beat all of them. And I'm not convinced that Dariush can't beat Oliveira. I mean, look, that is absolutely iron on top of iron. 155 pounds there. I've never seen a division like this. 145 is close. It's one of the reasons that I tell you, look, Conor was king of both at one point. You got to give Conor his due. It's the two hardest divisions. He found a way to get a strap in both of them. And aside from that, they're all scared of one another. I mean, I'm very glad that you and I are being a voice of reason and calling this out. And nothing frustrates me more than 170 pounds. But, Ariel, it is time that these guys get called out. And it's time that guys that do what Tony Ferguson is doing, which is extend an opportunity to somebody else, something somebody else did for you. It's a very cool thing. I don't see Tony getting any credit. I haven't heard Charles Oliveira thanking Tony. Oh, thank you so much. Oliveira beat all sorts of guys that never got him into a main event for a title till Tony came along. And I only bring that to you because Tony needs to be reflected and represented for what he is, which is a guy that's he's a man of the locker room, and he gives back. And I don't know that needs to go quiet. I think he should be a little bit more proud of that. I'm proud of him for it.
I agree. I love everything about that. I don't think you can knock Tony. He's not one of those guys who has picked and chosen his opponents throughout his career. And by the way, when a division loses a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, usually it kind of feels like there's a black cloud. You know, like when the light heavyweight division lost John Jones early on, it felt like, oh gosh, state of transition. This division is so deep that, yes, of course we miss Khabib. Yes, of course the UFC and the fans and the journalists and everyone would love to have Khabib in the mix, but it doesn't feel like it skips a beat because of the murderer's row in the top 10, right? I mean, It just feels like this, you know, with Conor fighting and Dustin and all this stuff. So that's very exciting. And the lightweight division is in focus. Other fights on the main card, Caitlin Chukagian fighting against Viviane Araujo, and Matt Schnell getting the bump up from the prelims after the withdrawal of Jack Hermanson in the Edmund Shabazian fight, which we hope to get next Saturday, going up against Rogerio Bontorin. That fight, a catch weight because Bontorin missed weight 137. He gave 20% of his purse to Matt Schnell. But I want to ask you about another fight on this main card, Chael, and it's a fight that is flying under the radar. We were talking about the two, lightweight fights. Of course, we were supposed to get Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards on this card. Shabazian, Jack Hermanson getting some headlines as well. But I don't feel like enough people are talking about Edson Barbozas and Shane Burgos. This is a fantastic fight on paper. Both guys rarely, if ever, are involved in boring fights. And Edson, in my opinion, look, I think Edson should be 2-0 as a featherweight. I thought he beat Danny Ige. It was a close fight in his featherweight debut. Ultimately, he lost. He's 1-1. He beat Makwan Amirkhani. I'm still not sure if Edson Barbozas' best home, his best weight class is 145. Do you feel like this is a good decision for him at this stage in his career? Because guys like Shane Burgos, they're tough. They hit really hard for 145. I feel like he's losing too much weight.
I was disappointed in it. I was very surprised when it happened. I thought that he was well on his way to being one of the boys at 55. So I was very surprised. I respected it, of course. I know that he looks up a lot to Jose Aldo. I think when Jose changed weight, he thought, well, maybe this is what I need to do, like my mentor did. He's very good there, and he moves very well. But I don't know why he would want to sacrifice that speed. At 155 pounds, he's arguably the fastest guy in the division. Even at 45, he's the fastest kicker within the division. I mean, don't forget, these are two great strikers. You're talking about Shane, talking about his opponent here. Fast. I mean, he can really kick these legs fast. But Burgos has these right here, okay? So this is a stand-up battle, but it's kicker versus boxer. And it's one of those things that you say it goes under the radar. I think it does too. People say they love a stand-up battle. Barboza is going to kick you until his legs are tired, but Shane only needs a couple of these, Ariel. I think it's a fun fight.
Shane, to me, is one of the most exciting fighters at 145. Great scene with Michael Chandler calling him his favorite fighter. Hits really hard. Again, always moving forward. Sometimes he'll lose, sometimes he'll win. He just had a 3-fight winning streak. I feel like this is a big opportunity for him. His 2 losses were his 2 most high-profile fights. This is an opportunity to say, yes, I am a player at 145 pounds. If you're Shane Burgos, are you trying to go toe-to-toe with Edson Barbozas, or are you trying to go back to your old-school wrestling days and you try to take this fight to the ground?
I think he will go toe-to-toe. I think he's going to come out, and I think he's going to test those waters. Yeah, and I also think there's some opportunity there. Okay, there's some real opportunity with the guys kicking at you. The problem is you got to see it coming. But there's some major defenses. There's some major things that you can do. I mean, don't forget the night that Tim Sylvia, to go all the way back to when he became champion, waited for Rico to throw a kick, saw it coming one straight down the middle. The problem you're going to have, and the problem Shane's going to have, as fast as Shane is, he's not as fast as Barboza. I mean, Barboza is a special. It is a unique speed when it comes to those leg kicks.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Barboza, he just re-signed with the UFC, and he was open about his future going into his last fight, about it being the last fight on his contract. He was open about wanting to get paid more, and he has come out this week and said he finally feels like he's getting what he's worth. He's happy with his new deal. All that is behind him. And I feel like there's some real value in that. I feel like that pressure being lifted off of one's shoulders, a family man, has kids, wife, doesn't have to worry anymore about the next contract, the next paycheck. It doesn't have to worry about, oh, I'm not getting paid what I think I'm worth. I feel like that will translate into a better performance from him tonight. Is that something that I'm just making up as a journalist, or as a fighter, being content, being happy with your deal? Is that worth more than we can maybe touch?
Look, everybody has motivation, Ariel, and what their motivation is isn't for anybody else, you or I, to come in and decide. And with Barboza, it wasn't just about the financial part. He saw that as a respect. He's saying, look, by these numbers that you're giving me, it makes me feel as though you don't want me. If you don't want me here, I don't want to be here. And you know what? That is a real thing. If you feel that the guy that you're working with doesn't want you here, you got to go. I mean, it makes you feel bad. You come in and you're drugged down even a little bit. You want to know where that matters? It's the same as anxiety. It's the same as an adrenaline dump. It creates some kind of emotion that gets you tired faster. If you feel like you're not wanted at work, who the heck would want to go? So I do think it's a real thing. And it probably helped him more and served him better in the gym, helped with his motivation. But in his case, with what he's revealed very openly to us, the audience, yes, Ariel, I think it matters.
Barboza's 35. So, slowly getting up there, but not quite, I think past his prime, but this is an important stretch for him. I'm really curious to see how he looks in this fight. He looks very gaunt on the scale. I think he's losing a little too much at 145. But again, I also thought, he won his debut and should be 2-0. So what the hell am I talking about? You beat Shane Burgos, though. You do what, you do what he wants to do to Shane Burgos. I will shut up about this 145 thing. I will be a believer, and he doesn't have to listen to me anymore. So that's the fight that I think a lot of people, the insiders, the smart marks, the marks, if you will. Are you a mark, a smart, or are you just a smart? Is it, wait, well, there's three of them. There's a mark, there's a smart, and there's a smart.
I don't know the third one. I will tell you this. I want to be a mark. Unfortunately, I'd qualify as a smart. I don't want to be, though. I'm very open to suspending reality. If they want to come in and bring something, I'm happy to watch.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like the dirt sheet is there. You peek at it, but then you're mad at yourself because you'd rather just enjoy it and be surprised, right?
100%.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
The vernacular that we just used for the people that got it are really enjoying this show right now.
Oh, I know. This is fantastic. I mean, we could talk about Dave, Big Dave, and the Observer all day long. All right, so the main card, you see it right there. 5 fights, ESPN Plus pay-per-view, 10 p.m. Eastern. Let's say hello now to the voice of the UFC, who will be calling the action tonight. UFC 262, Toyota Center, Houston Rockets, home of the Rockets. You know the whole drill by now. He'll be alongside that Rockets fan, Daniel Cormier, who hasn't had much to celebrate this season. And, of course, Joe Rogan, capacity crowd. You know him, Jon Anik, in the house with us, wearing a fantastic salmon shirt as he's getting set for the pay-per-view this evening. By the way, it's a topic of discussion. We have to talk about it. Stash or no stash? I feel like you get this all the time now, but I see the stash, so we're going stash tonight.
I think so. I mean, I'll shave my head in the morning, as I always do, a little skin fade on show day. Part of the reason I did not have a mustache last week is because Gregor Gillespie's girlfriend absolutely hates it. And she and he reached out to me, and as respectfully as they could. So for Gregor's fight, I did not have the mustache, but
you're kidding. They reached out to you and said they don't want you to wear a stash for their.
They just reached out and said, hey man, like my girlfriend thinks you do a great job, but finds the mustache super ugly and distracting. She says you're a good looking guy and it takes you down several levels. And so I sort of just thought for that fight, I wouldn't wear it. And we had a little fun with that. But as you know, man, like you and I shave our heads, even though we could grow our hair. We're just trying to be confident out here. And this is the look that we go with,
Amen. Respect. All right. So there's a lot to discuss on this card, a very hotly contested 5-fight main card. You got 10 ranked fighters. You've got, no one above a -160. This is the closest as far as lines are concerned. And a main card is concerned since UFC 211, according to Stats and Info here at ESPN. But actually want to start on the early prelims. And speaking of Gregor Gillespie, let's stick with the Northeast. Shawn Soriano quietly returning to the UFC after a 6-year layoff, just beat Neil Lahat in UAE Warriors and gets the call to fight in the UFC. I know you had a chance to talk to him. Did he expect to be back, or did he think that the rest of his MMA career would be kind of traveling outside of the UFC?
It seemed as though he had kind of closed the door. Now, he was trying to stay ready after the Neil Lahat win, which, by the way, was the biggest payday of his career. And Shawn Soriano's been at this a long time, even though he's only 31 years of age. But when you look back at his UFC fights, and you know this, Tatsuya Kawajiri, Chaz Skelly, Charles Rosa. I mean, it seemed as though, and Joe Silva often would try to challenge you in your weakest domain, but it seemed as though he was set up for failure a little bit. When you hear Henry Hooft and Michael Chandler talk about this guy as a striker, they put him in such rarefied air. He's one of the best strikers that Henry Hooft has ever coached. And think about all the decorated kickboxers and mixed martial arts athletes that Henry has worked with. So he deserves to be here. And I think for Shawn, seeing lesser fighters get opportunities on Dana White's Contender Series, in part was frustrating. But then in another part, he's like, I'm not going to do the Contender Series, and thankfully he's back where he belongs. He is an underdog, but up a weight class, we'll see what he can do with it. But I think we're all New Englanders or otherwise excited to have Shawn Soriano back.
Yeah, it's always great when someone, has to unfortunately leave the UFC, work their way back up and get a second chance. And sometimes we see fighters perform even better in that second chance. So he'll be kicking off the card later on this evening. I want to ask you about another fighter on the prelims with a very famous last name, Antonina Shevchenko, of course, the sister of one Valentina Shevchenko, the flyweight queen. I think Antonina's best performance in the UFC was in her last fight against Ariane Lipski. I feel like it's coming together. Maybe it's taken her a little longer than Valentina, but I feel like it is coming together, and you could see it coming together for her. I know you spoke to her as well, and Valentina, of course, they're always by each other's side. Yeah. You can't see one without the other, just a few feet behind. How do you feel about what's happening with Antonina and kind of her career sort of blossoming now?
I mean, I think you set it up well. I don't have a ton to add. This is sort of the United States hometown of sorts for the Shevchenkos. They've spent a lot of time here in Houston, so this will very much feel like a home game for them. But you're right. Valentina said to me yesterday, Antonina is really just starting to level up. And she didn't necessarily have this burning desire to prove herself as a mixed martial arts, elite when she first started in the UFC. But now it seems like the desire has aligned with the skills. And we make so much about Valentina's Muay Thai credentials every time she fights, and rightfully so. But, let's not forget what Antonina did, 11-time world Muay Thai champion as well. To your point, just took her a little bit longer to develop, but there's a definite urgency with which she is fighting now that did not accompany some of her early UFC starts. And urgent's the buzzword for that fight, because Andrea Lee told us she's fighting for her job, and she called this a must win. Her words, not mine. So I think she's going to get the best Andrea Lee, and a nice way for us to kick off the prelim portion on ESPN tonight.
Yeah, Andrea Lee on a 3-fight losing streak, so hoping to snap that against the very tough, very game Antonina Shevchenko. Speaking of tough and game, Shane Burgos, that's one way to describe him, right? Or two ways to describe him. I mean, this guy, in my opinion, one of the best strikers at 145, one of the toughest outs at 145, one of the heaviest hitters at 145. And what a great scene a couple of days ago, captured by the UFC cameras, where Michael Chandler goes and finds him and lets us know that of all the fighters on the roster, 400, 500 fighters on the roster, Shane Burgos, Hurricane Shane, is his favorite fighter to watch. That's a pretty massive, vote of confidence and endorsement from Michael Chandler. Now, he has a big fight against Edson Barbozas. Fascinating fight. This is one of those fights that feels like it's flying under the radar a little bit going into this card, but I feel very confident saying it's not going to be boring. Right. And I feel like it will be contested for the most part on the feet, although it sounds to me like you feel otherwise. Why?
Yes. And I do want to ask you before we talk about that, do you remember when Shane Burgos had his corner man cut his hair in between rounds? Shane's braiding his hair this time around. He didn't want to. He just wanted to pull it back. He's getting braids.
Nice.
That if he didn't like it, he's going to pull them out. But he has a lot more to his game than striking. Certainly, he is most comfortable in a kickboxing fight. And what he said to us in our fighter meeting, he said it's sort of hard because 3 times a fight, the beginning of every round, 1, 2, and 3, like my mentality is, I'm just going over there to kill this guy. And like, that's a mentality that he is trying to sort of escape from a little bit, because in his amateur career, this dude was pulling guard, as he told us. He was a grappler. He has wrestling chops. And he said he has no problem instinctively, if there's an opportunity, trying to use those. But he was very self-critical of the Josh Emmett fight. I mean, I don't have to tell you that not only did he get hit way too much, but he had an opponent who had a compromised leg, and he didn't continuously, perpetually attack it, and ultimately lost the third round decisively and wasn't able to get Josh Emmett out of there. So he's motivated. It's crazy. We put that Burgos Emmett fight in this stratosphere for being one of the fights of the year in 2020. And he's trying to distance himself from that performance as much as humanly possible. So I do believe that if the fight goes to the ground, you're going to see wrinkles of Burgos's game. He says, nobody's ever seen my MMA wrestling. Nobody knows that I have jiu-jitsu. And in part, when it comes to film study for his future opponents, that's a good thing because they don't have that film. But if there was ever a matchup, Ariel, to try to change levels and change the complexion of the fight, you're fighting Edson Barbozas. So I think Burgos is going to mix it up. I guess we'll see.
I think Barboza, I personally view him as 2-0 as a featherweight. I thought he beat Dan Ige. It was super close. Then comes back and beats Makwan Amirkhani. But I'm still not sold on the idea of Edson Barboza at 145. I still feel like he's cutting way too much weight for 145. What do you think?
So if you saw the weigh-in on Friday, he was wearing it a little bit, and Alex Davis and Pahumpa kind of had to help him off the stage. But I will say, he was still sound of body and mind. And when one of our UFC staffers went over to check on him, he smiled and winked and gave the fist bump. So sometimes we lean so much into that body language on the scale. And I think a lot of physicians will tell you, this guy got 30 hours before he's going to fight. He's going to be absolutely fine. Largely every time Barboza weighs in at featherweight, I think there's some trepidation for all of us. But I think if you're judging him on those two performances against Ige and Makwan Amirkhani, they were quite strong. But one thing that was most interesting, I thought, out of Barboza, when people ask him about this fight, he is fully expectant that he's going to have to go 15 hard minutes with this guy. And Edson obviously has some great highlights and finishing weapons, doesn't have the one-punch knockout power per se. But Edson seems to have wrapped his head around the fact that it's going to be really hard to get this guy out of there early. And I think that's sort of a wise approach.
So I was talking to Lloyd Pearson, who's one of the top managers in this game. He's been in the game for several years. On Thursday night, he's in Houston with Tony Ferguson, who's fighting in the co-main event against Beneil Dariush, of course. And he said to me, Ariel, this has been one of the most special fight weeks for me. And I said, why? And he said, because I have had an opportunity since I got here on, I think, Sunday or Monday, to spend the majority of every day with the great Freddie Roach, who will be in the corner of Tony Ferguson. Like that's fantasy camp type of stuff, right? To just pick the brain of Freddie Roach, go for dinner, lunch with Freddie Roach. Have you seen Freddie? I hear he's around the hotel. Any glimpses of the great Freddie Roach?
Yes, Freddie Roach was in our fighter meeting, and I got to shake his hand for the first time in a long time. I mean, we had him on our boxing radio show probably 24 times. He doesn't know who the hell I am, but you're breaking news to me telling me that Freddie Roach is going to be in his corner, right? Because they have been tight-lipped with us. And even though Freddie Roach has the fight kit and part of the team, we weren't sure who exactly were going to be the guys who were ultimately in the corner.
That's what they've told me.
Well, that's great. And if you read between the lines, it seems as though the motivation to bring in Freddie Roach was defensive and not offensive. It was slipping and moving the head and trying to figure out a way to get hit less in these kickboxing exchanges. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that Tony really had to hit the reset button. And, I think he's sensitive to certain words that are used when it comes to people he's working with. He doesn't like when you call them coaches per se. But when I sat down with Tony Ferguson for our fighter meeting before the Charles Oliveira fight, he was not in a good place. He and I have a pretty close relationship, and that was as combative as we had ever been head to head. Didn't want to answer my questions. We hashed it out in the months prior, and he was a totally different guy in this fighter meeting. So he's a wild card, man. I try not to lean too far into his every word, because not that he's not telling the truth, but sometimes it's hard to decipher exactly what he wants you to take out of what he is saying. But he's in great shape if the scale is any indicator. And I think even though he thinks he's going to steamroll Beneil, and that has been sort of what he's been putting out there publicly, they've done their homework, and he understands the type of challenge that's in front of him tonight.
Okay, so I have to ask two follow-ups here. Number one, because I don't think I knew this. I mean, it sounds somewhat familiar, but I don't really know the answer. Why does he not like to call them coaches? One. And two, obviously you say like he's in a better spot now, but like, how could you best describe the state that he is in now as opposed to December, and why is he in a better state now based on what you've seen and your interactions?
Sure. In terms of the coaching, it's really just about him being his own coach, right? So I think he doesn't like the verb. But, he and I have always had a close relationship. And so when he came into the fighter meeting before UFC 256, And I asked a question. He's like, does anybody else have anything? Anik doesn't seem like he wants to be here. And that was totally removed from anything. I mean, of course I wanted to be there, right?
Yeah.
But that was totally removed from anything that was in my mind. So that was sort of off-putting, and he couldn't wait to get out of there, and juxtaposed against a Tony Ferguson that was just very giving and forthcoming with information this time around. And I just think that, you know, obviously 2020 was arguably the most challenging year of his career. And I think just getting some separation from the Gaethje finish and getting some separation from that one-sided Oliveira fight has given him sort of peace of mind. I mean, talking to Brock Lesnar and Greg Nelson and some of his old coaches has seemed to given him some peace of mind. So we'll see. I mean, he's got to turn the words into actions, and Beneil's on a roll, but I'm excited to see the co-main.
What a lovely story this main event is for many different reasons. You have, you know, Charles Oliveira, who debuted in 2010 in the game, UFC, specifically 11 years, 28th UFC fight, can break the record, Michael Bisping's record, 26 fights to get to the undisputed title if he wins. And then you have Chandler, who's done his thing for Bellator all these years. And as of right this moment, only 2 fighters in the history of the sport have held a UFC title and Bellator title, Eddie Alvarez, Chris Cyborg. He would be the third. I'll throw you on that list. I mean, play-by-play guy for Bellator, play-by-play guy for UFC. I'll put you on that list as well. I know he wasn't around when you were working for them so many, I mean, a lifetime ago, right, if you will. But this guy is, I mean, he's like a locomotive, and like the confidence, it's just amazing. Being in his presence this week, what are your takeaways?
So the biggest difference, I would say, in Michael Chandler over the last couple years has been a skill thing, right? He has sort of mastered the ability to cut the angles, close the distance, and land with accuracy. And if that version of Michael Chandler shows up, Charles Oliveira's got to be really careful, especially in those first 2 rounds. For me, this Charles Oliveira story, though, is really the headliner. Like, I know there's a Chandler side of this, but for Charles Oliveira to be in this position, I mean, he had so many doubters. When he filled out his UFC bio, Ariel, in 2010, and he listed his strengths, all he listed was heart. And his heart and his toughness has been perpetually challenged and questioned and denigrated over the course of his UFC career. When he got injured in that Max Holloway main event in 2015, people were calling him soft. You know, the weight cut misses, people were questioning his heart. So to think that this guy could move up to 55 and go 9-1 and be fighting for the undisputed title in what has essentially been his American hometown of Houston, I mean, it's a movie. You just truly can't make it up. And he has been a hard guy to extract information from for us on the broadcast, right? So this story comes out this week about his rheumatoid arthritis and how he almost wasn't ever able to be an athlete in his whole life. I've called, I think, 8 or 9 of Charles Oliveira's fights, and we haven't even mentioned that, you know, because he just hasn't had a whole lot to say. He's just a humble, shy guy from humble beginnings who just kind of wants to be left alone. And the fact that he is in this position and potentially 25 minutes or fewer tonight from changing his life forever, it's what it's all about for me. It's a weird juxtaposition, right? You got a guy with 27 UFC fights and a guy with 1 fight. But for those of us who have watched Charles Oliveira's whole career, were he to be able to put a capstone on it with a UFC title would be one of the most special things that I've ever witnessed octagon side.
And not to sum up someone's life in a minute or so, but for those that may have missed that story and the illness that he deals with and has dealt with, can you bring them up to speed?
Yeah. So bone rheumatoid arthritis when he was like 7 years old. They thought he was going to have to be in a wheelchair and never play sports. He had a lot of pain and he was having a hard time dealing with that as a child. And ultimately he had to get an injection every 15 days for several years. But when we asked him about it in our fighter meeting, he said no ill effects. There's no residual ankle pain, and essentially was given a clean bill of health in his early teenage years, and obviously hasn't looked back. But he was such a good athlete as a kid that when he was sort of faced with the proposition of not doing sports, he told his mother and father, like, I'd rather die, than not be an athlete. And we didn't know that story until this week. And in some part you feel like, man, am I not doing my job? But, you know, a lot of these reporters had to get that contact with his mom to bring this to the surface.
I like the subtle nod. I believe it was a subtle nod to the Tom Gerbasi bio there. That has been a staple.
Yes.
Respect to the great team.
Of course. I mean, I still, and maybe I'm antiquated, but I still start my process of preparation with those bios. I convert it all to this fighter card and then I add my notes, but that's how I study, almost as if I'm back in college. I feel like if I'm just entering data,
Right.
It's not going to stick. So it's a little bit arduous, but hasn't failed me all that often.
All right. Well, we'll let you do your thing. Good luck on the call tonight alongside DC and Joe Rogan, UFC 262, the great Jon Anik, kind enough to join us.
Thank you, buddy. Hope to see you soon.
And as we say goodbye to Jon Anik, we want to invite all of you at home to make your fight picks on all the fights, including Tony Ferguson versus Beneil Dariush, and challenge your friends for a chance to win $5,000 with ESPN's UFC 262 Pick'em game. To play for free, go to ESPN.com/UFC Pick'em and make your picks right now. All right. We say hello to Chael Sonnen. Welcome back to the most highly anticipated segment of the show, Chael's picks. Time to get the picks. And now we want you all to listen to these picks very closely because he went 5-0 last time. So no more jokes. Chael, we shall start with Shane Burgos and Edson Barbozas. Who wins? How? Why?
Edson Barbozas, I just think those kicks are going to be a real thing. I think he's got to get offline, but I think that he knows that. He's not going to get hit with those big bolos, those big shots by Shane. I don't believe, and particularly not early. And Edson, he's got a pace, Ariel. If you don't get him in the first round, you're not likely to get him at all. I'm going Barboza.
Decision, it sounds like.
It sounds like a decision, yes.
All right. Edson Barbozas decision. That would be a massive win for him at 145 pounds. All right, let's go to the co-main now. Tony Ferguson lost his last 2 in a row. Beneil Dariush won his last 6 in a row. Co-main event. Who wins, how, and why?
Tony Ferguson. However, he must win the first round. He cannot throw the first round away as he's done in so many of his 5-round fights and then come on and win the next couple. He's got to get it done early. He's got to show us that he can move his head. He's going to have to frustrate, and he's going to have to make sure that his opponent understands you're in here with the big dog now. I gave you this opportunity because I knew that I could beat you. He's got to get psychological advantage, and he's got to do it early.
Wow. Okay. I don't see a lot of people picking the underdog Tony Ferguson going into this fight. Appreciate that. Sounds like decision.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Tony's going to fight him for a while. I don't think he can catch Benny in a submission.
Yeah.
I don't think Benny's going to go for the triangle or the guillotine.
No, I would agree with that. All right. And then the big one, the main event, Michael Chandler, former Bellator Lightweight Champion, trying to become just the 3rd fighter in MMA history to hold a Bellator and UFC title. The other 2, of course, Eddie Alvarez, Chris Cyborg, fighting for the UFC title in his 2nd UFC fight against Charles Oliveira. 11 years in the promotion, 28th UFC fight. It would be a record if he wins most fights to get to an undisputed title. Current record holder, Michael Bisping, 26 fights. Who wins? How? Why?
Michael Chandler. I'm not bullish on this, partner. I bet snacks and nothing else because I've got to tell you, we're also going to know within the first couple of minutes, can Oliveira find a way to lead this dance? Chandler is known to start a race, start out ahead, and never give up that pole position. He needs to do that here, but he needs to be ready for the wrestling. He needs to be ready for the kicks. It's not just a game of who's got the longest reach. I'm trusting that Chandler, with his consistency, is going to take charge. He's going to come forward. He's going to stalk his opponent down. He's going to make him think twice. I think Michael Chandler, and I even think that Chandler later in the fight, 4th, 5th round, is going to win by TKO.
Wow. How about that? Okay. Take that to the bank. And 2 fun follow-ups based on that result and prediction. Number 1, Chandler versus Conor or Poirier, big time fight, especially with the momentum. If he wins like that against Oliveira, who's looked so good as of late, and holy smokes, the trolling that will come from one Patricio Pitbull if Chandler wins the UFC title as the 145er who went up and knocked him out. My God, that is going to be really interesting to see. And Pitbull's contract is coming up as well. So keep in your, just saying, keep your eye on that situation. We'll worry about that later. UFC 262. It's about to kick off. You can watch it on the platform we built, ESPN Plus, and then especially pay-per-view. You have to go to ESPN Plus to watch that exclusively 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 in the West, 5 fights. Afterwards, we'll be back here on YouTube, Twitter, all those places for the post-fight show. Chael will be doing important stuff on TV. I'm just a little digital guy. I do stuff over here. They don't let me out of my house, but it's okay because I love talking to all of you. For Chael P., for a great production team, for Jon Anik as well. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the fights. We'll talk to you afterwards.